Craig and I were talking about this before, that Craig has had people come to his seahorse world. And by the way, it's brilliant weather in Tasmania. Go down there, visit him. They need the money in the seahorse world. They need the money in the Creation Museum on the tourist jetty down there at Beauty Point. So go and see them. It's worth seeing. But in reality, when you talk to Craig, he's got millions upon millions of seahorses born every month, really. And a specialist came to visit him. But Craig, what was this specialist interested in, and what did he discover about your seahorses?
How was that?
Craig on screen.
Actually, a she. It was Dr.
Sorry.
Keely Bumstead and another lady called Hyrin from the Australian National University, which happens to be my university. Came down and wanted to do research on seahorse eyes, and they set up in our lab and did a whole bunch of experiments. And it turns out seahorses have very good vision. But just before I get on to a couple of things they said, the seahorse eyes had always intrigued me because when you look at a seahorse, which has got a sort of obviously long face and narrow head, the eyes, when you look straight on, are independent. So you've got the eyes looking all over independently. And when I considered this, and when you think about it, a lot of fish do it like this, and birds do as well, they're looking in two directions at the same time. And their brain is, which is tiny in a seahorse, their brain is interpreting the information that they're constantly getting from their eyes rotating in different directions, in two different directions at the one time. So I always was intrigued as to how that might happen. So as Diane was sort of pointing out, the brain is critical and essential in the way it interprets the information the eyes are gathering from the light. But these researchers were looking at seahorse eyes, and they obviously did stuff back at the university as well, looking closely in the eyes. But it turns out that seahorses have a fovea. So Diane had that, but didn't talk about it on her diagrams. The fovea is an indentation in the back of the retina, and it's there for giving high visual acuity. So being able to see acutely, if you like, and getting real detail. And the researchers looked at this and determined, well, it's because seahorses eat such a small prey because they've got such a small mouth, and they completely rely on their sight for feeding. They need to be able to see well. And so they've got these foveas, which a number of fish do, but not all fish do. And they use it. They're highly specialised. In fact, the words of the researcher says that seahorses' visual systems are specialised to hunt small prey in a wide range of environments. And it was also interesting to read in the paper that they produced that fish generally have visual pigments within their cone receptors that are spectrally tuned, and again, Diane used this term, that they're tuned to the most abundant wavelengths within their given habitat. So different coloured waters in the tropics, it's bluer than in other areas where it's greener, and also at different depths, the actual pigments within the cone receptors are actually tuned for that fish to the depth that they're at and the coloured water that they live in. So I found that quite intriguing. But it just blows my mind that these things are so designed, so designed.
In fact, the evidence shows they're so well pre-planned, pre-thought of. You need a brain, you need the eyeballs, but one doesn't work without the other. Nothing works without visual acuity, so you can actually select the wavelengths that are commonly around you, and it works. It's just unbelievable the number of gazillion things that have to work together to make the eyeball work. Now, before I bring up my PowerPoints, I'll bring one of my favorite fossils. Now, I've got thousands and thousands of fossils, and many of them include hundreds and hundreds of trilobites from all over the planet. Yes, I've been collecting rocks since I was just a teenager. So now that I'm 77 this year, you can't believe how many fossils I've actually got, including a vast number of trilobites. Now, I'm glad they invented the name trilobite in 1781 because it was a whole lot better than words like the Dudley bug the English had come up with. Now, I've been to Dudley. I've been to the very quarry where they found these trilobites first, but the best they came up with was Dudley bug. So thank the Lord for the man who gave us the word trilobite. It just means it's got 3 segments. And he didn't know what it was, just like nobody knew what a Dudley bug was. But these rolled up ones, as distinct from these flat ones, have been the most helpful. You see, because they're rolled up, when you cut them open, they actually show their intestines, they show their legs, they show their arthropodic structure. And so we know an awful lot about trilobites, but it's only in the past 20 or 30 years or so where they've managed to get to the eyeball, there's one there, which is multifaceted. And indeed, the lenses are unusual in the fact that they're made of calcite. You know, the stuff you make chalk out of, the stuff that's in calcium carbonate, the stuff that we grow our stalactites out of. We're not the first to invent this experiment of taking the eyeballs out. We give full credit to the guys who did it first, and we have copied what they've done so that you can see a close-up of the trilobite I was holding. You can see the lenses, the relationships today. There's our roly-poly bugs. When you pick them up, they roll up. Now, trilobites, it seemed, did exactly the same. And there's a batch of, I touched those ones, and immediately I did, they rolled up. There's my rolled up trilobite. You can see the bulgy lens on the side there at the top. Get a bit closer, get a bit closer. And yes, we took all these pictures, really good close-up stuff, I tell you. And you get right up close and you can see the little round lenses with a little covering there. And you get close up and look what you can actually extract these. And you can learn a lot by extracting them. So look, there's a close-up side view of a trilobite eye lens. Big fat lens on one side, funny looking lens on the other. It's called a compound eye because most of us don't have 2 lenses in the eye. Glenn might be coming up for replacement lenses, probably not made of calcite, but when you look, the front lens there, the bit you can see at the front of that trilobite eye, and a back lens, which has got a most unusual shape. Now, what it turns out, the front lens is made of oriented calcite. Now, calcite, calcium carbonate, it makes lovely crystals. But this front lens, when we say oriented calcite, the actual lens is designed of a crystalline structure so that it all points back in the direction the light will have to travel coming from the left-hand side to get to the back, what's called an intralensar bowl, which is a totally different shape. Now, if you run some experiments and you actually look at the way the trilobite eye works, and yes, we can carve calcite. We've been using calcite in lenses for microscopes for a long time. It's a brilliant stuff. The light coming in on the left-hand side, it's the big, bold lens made of orientated calcite. Then it goes through the intralensar bowl, and if you make a copy of that, well, you have a few problems because we can't actually make the back lens to sit directly on the front lens. But we can pull them out and run these experiments, and in the actual trilobite eye, when it's like that, the light will focus. So that for the trilobite brain, it works the same as yours. It can interpret the light coming in. But when you just take the orientated calcite by itself, yes, we can do this experiment. We can make a lens like that. We've been making them for ages. So we know how calcite behaves. Notice on the right-hand side, the lens does not bring all the light to a focal spot. If the trilobite's eyes were like that, above or below water, it would see nothing but blurry, mixed up information. Now, there's the comparison. The top lens, no, what we call the interlenser bowl correcting one, it doesn't focus. The bottom one focuses, particularly because there is no air gap between those two different lenses. Now, did you catch that? There is no air gap. We can't do this because we can shape them like that. We can even try and put them together, but every time we do, there'll be either water or glue or air between the two, so it messes up our experiment. Now, when we told you before that a match is made of a piece of wood that won't do matchstick shape, dipped into a piece of burnable stuff, and matchsticks even made won't dip themselves into that. So let's ask what calcite can do if you want to work backwards and figure out where trilobite eyes came from. Left by itself, just in the presence of water and air, carbon dioxide gets into the water, comes down through the cave walls, and it produces stalactites, stalagmites. It produces shoals. It sometimes drips in the ponds and makes beautiful crystals that have wonderful optical properties. That's why we've used them in lenses for all sorts of things. There's a piece of beautiful calcite. Yep, I've got lots of this stuff. I gave some away to my youngest grandchildren for Christmas presents. Look what you can do. You can put it on a letter and the letter shows up twice on the other side. Calcite's got some magnificent, interesting properties. But there's one thing calcite can't do. Left by itself over millions of years, even in the presence of water, it will not do that. I mean, we can't even do that without getting air in between those two lenses. And air in a lens really messes up what the light will do. Now, that's what a trilobite eyeball looks like. When we showed you them before, it's got the upper lens unit, the one poking to the outside, that's made of directed crystalline structure that allows the light to go through to the back. It's got that special intralenser bowl. And of course, what's interesting, the mathematicians actually predicted calcite could make lenses like this long before we even understood trilobite eyes themselves. Mathematically, that's possible. But did DNA do this? Well, you can't make matchsticks even dip themselves in a piece of burnable stuff by themselves. DNA is made of a whole lot of stuff, carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, hydrogen, etc., none of which do DNA. Now, have you got that yet? A creation is when a substance is made out of something that can't do the stuff itself. So the components of DNA do not do information. Hydrogen, sulfur, carbon does not have the information for making sophisticated, unbelievably sophisticated codes. Get that into your head. It's so vital when you're dealing with this subject. So here's our challenge to evolutionists like Dawkins, Attenborough, the professor at the university, the people who foolishly believe what's in their textbooks. How many successful eyes have they designed? Or we're trying our robot eyes, our cameras on cars. You see, the camera on car only works well if it's got a pre-programmed brain based on experience. Likewise, the robots, they have to copy at best. How many successful eyes have they designed? Well, compared to giraffes' eyeballs, compared to eyeballs that are in ourselves, they haven't. In fact, there's the challenge. When evolutionists design a better eyeball, then we'll be impressed by their arguments, except there's one flaw in it. Their eyeball was a created eyeball, not the one they've got in their head, but the one they existed before, the one they're not a part of, the one they put meaningless stuff, metal, silica, carbon, whatever you're going to put into it, and it works only because a creator was involved. Now, again, I want to stress to you, if your eyes are failing and you need glasses, or like Glenn, you need a new lens, don't blame God. You see, the evidence for creation is a perfect creation with brilliant design, overlaid at the edges by the evidence of sinful habitats causing degeneration. So, Ravi, no, not an example of a teacher who takes credit for the grade A class and fails the people who don't, but a teacher who actually takes credit for it all, and then he dies for all his students on a cross. because the one problem they can't solve is the problem called sin. Simple point. There are plenty of opinions and theories that disagree with the Bible teaching of God as the pre-existing intelligent designer, but the facts never do. Eyeball to eyeball, you're looking at 100% conviction of evidence. That's why God says the invisible things of God from the creation of the world are clearly seen. You've got eyes, you've got a brain, and you understand this. So whether your name is Ravi or Dawkins or Attenborough or whatever, you understand this. Please don't pretend you've got an excuse. Please don't say the worms in Africa prove this wrong, because we've got abundant evidence, even on our website, how stupid that actually is. So people, all of us, me included, are without excuse for giving God the credit and the praise.